So thank you everybody for coming. Thank you Lindsay and Jess for presenting today. Welcome everybody to the North Suburban Chicago Tableau user group. And I'm going to share my screen with a couple bits here. You can see. All right, there we've got the nice shot of the skyline, which you can only see if you live at the, I'm trying to think where that is. That is a view from the Museum of Science and Industry, I believe. This is our lineup for today. So I'm going to talk just for a couple minutes here, and then we're going to have Jess do a 30 tips in 30-minute session. Those are always super awesome, and we're very excited to have you. And then we'll allow for a few minutes of Q&A. So in the spirit of the 30 tips, you got 10 answers in 10 minutes, and we'll see how that goes. And then we've got Lindsay, who's going to show off her Iron Viz submission, which is very, very cool, and I'm very excited about that. Also, I'm going to run a poll during the meeting, and just to ask everyone some questions who's attending, and see what you're interested in from the user group. Like, what kind of sessions would you like to see, things like that. So let's see here. Oh, this is just LinkedIn. You know, North Suburban Chicago Tableau user group. If you search for that on LinkedIn, you will get to this link. So you don't need to remember this link, right? But that is the link. But if you just go and search for that name, you will find us on LinkedIn. There is also a TUG community link on the Tableau community page. Same thing, you don't need to remember this, but if you do community.tableau.com, you can find us. Yeah, you're not really interested in my background. So with that, I am going to do a couple quick things before we launch into Jess, and those are, first, let's start with the Q&A. I'm going to put the Q&A link up. I just did something there. I'm going to put the Q&A information into the chat. Okay. So let me find the chat. Where's the chat? I'm going to try stopping to share so that I can share in the chat. I'll just say chat link again so that it's clear what that is. Sorry, that is the Q&A link. Sorry, Q&A link. So I'm putting that in there so that when we get to Q&A time, there can be questions queued up for our speakers, right? And then that way we can go to the Q&A that's queued up there. The other thing I'm going to put in is the direct poll voting link. I'm going to put that in the chat as well. Poll voting link. And that is in the chat as well now. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, so I've put this direct poll voting link and the Q&A link both in the chat. The Q&A link is, like I said, as you think of questions, you can post them to the Q&A link and they'll be queued up for us when we're ready for them. And you know, then when it's the end of the session, I'll broadcast the questions on the screen. You can vote for which questions you think are the most interesting, that kind of thing. And then our presenters can answer the ones that they want. With that, I'm going to launch into that direct poll voting link real quick. So I've already voted for that question, so it's not showing me. Let's see here. Right, so if you go to that voting link.
I think, Alex, you only sent them to the panelists instead of everybody.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Do you want me to send it to everybody?
It was just a test, making sure you're paying attention. All right, all panelists and attendees. So everyone should have the voting link in there. So if you go to that poll voting link, that etc.ch link, Yes, thank you, Sadal, for being patient with me on that one. Yes, this will be recorded. Someone asked that question in the Q&A. I am going to do the Q&A through Pigeonhole from now on, mostly, but yes, this session is being recorded so that you can watch this later, and we'll send out a link about that and post it to the LinkedIn and all that sort of thing afterwards. Let's go to that voting link. So right now, what we've got is some poll questions. So right now we're in question number 1, and that question is, are you interested in us running Viz challenges in the TUG? All right, so I'm going to stretch this out. And, you know, we can see what the answers are turning out as. We'll give this a minute, and then we'll switch to the next question, et cetera, et cetera. Right now, we're running kind of 50-50. All right, let me go. We're going to go to the next question. Would you potentially submit an entry for a Viz challenge? So we've done this before, and for Lindsay and Jess, we've done Viz challenges in our user group before. And we were going to have one today, but that one didn't work out. We're actually getting pretty decent yes votes. Obviously, I wouldn't expect everyone to submit for a Viz challenge, but 15 yeses is pretty good. We're almost running at 50-50, but that's a pretty reasonable number at this point. Let me see how many. We have 84 participants, and we're running at about 50% of participants are responding to the poll. Remember, the poll is in the chat. So the link to the poll is in the chat, if you're interested. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question. Where is it here? Direct poll cockpit. So another thought we had was doing like a Tableau trivia challenge, right? So instead of a Viz challenge, it's having like a live trivia challenge where, you know, you can try and answer the questions, and you know, person with the most points wins, that kind of thing. You know, we'll have some sort of prizes. So right now, yes is outpacing no by a lot. There's a few not sures. So that's looking really good. We'll give it another couple seconds. We're at 85 participants and almost 50% on this one as well. So that seems to be kind of how many people are awake and not getting coffee yet. We'll go to the next question. What kind of prizes do you like? So you could say, I don't like prizes or other things. Right, so we've done prizes for our past Viz challenges. So just curious what people are interested in. You know, if we had prizes, what would you like? Nobody said I don't like prizes. Shocking. But look, Lindsay and Jess, I don't know if this has struck you yet, but we've had the most responses to this question.
Right, I noticed that.
All of a sudden, everybody was super interested in responding to the poll. That's fantastic. Okay, so that's interesting to know. We're going to move on to the next question.
You should have done that question first, and then the question about would you do the Viz challenge?
Right. Well, we could always go back to that question, actually. So what kind of sessions do you prefer at a TUG meeting? So you could vote for as many of these as you like. So this is to give us an idea of what you're interested in. What do you want to see in these meetings? So we're trying to make this be, you know, attendee-led as much as possible, right? You know, what are you interested in? And as it says, you can vote for anything you like, but it's just more of, you know, what are you interested in? And we won't do all of these every session, but just to give us an idea of what kind of sessions you would like to see. I'll give it a few more minutes because we've had, 50 to 70 people responding to the previous questions. So I would expect to see, 30, 40, 50 responses on some of these topics.
Folks did say it's a single select in the chat. Alex, just so you know.
They're saying it's a single select?
Yep.
Really? Okay, well, that's interesting to see. Oh my goodness. Okay, I just changed the voting thing to multiple. So if you refresh the page, in theory, you should be able to vote. Let me try it as well. I'm still seeing the single. It says multiple choice. And yet I'm seeing single choice. Okay. This is interesting as well to see what people want to see the most of. So I'm sorry that the multiple choice is not working. I'll actually fix that for the end of the session, after Lindsay's session, and we'll do the multiple choice because it would be interesting to see this one. This is an interesting question, but I'll have to redo it apparently. So we'll move on to the next question because that did not work. Oh, this is the last one I had. Do you plan to attend TC20? Keep in mind that TC20 is free and online this year. Yay! Yes is outvoting no by a lot. That's a good thing. Yeah, it's really hard to say no to free, and TC20, TC is a really, really good event. I'm sure a lot of you have attended in the past, but it is fantastic.
Sorry, Alex, I think you have to reshare your screen. I think it might be stopped. There you go.
Yep, yep. Yep, so we got a lot of yeses. Okay, so with that, thank you for responding to the polls. It was really interesting to see what people are interested in. I will do the multi-select on things you're interested in at the user group meeting. I will have to redo that one because it didn't adjust from the single to the multiple select when I had changed it. So I will redo that for the end of the session. But in the meantime, we are going to jump to Jess's session, 30 tips in 30 minutes. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and pass it to Jess.
Thank you, Alex. And I saw on that poll that looks like tips and tricks was something people are interested in. So you're certainly in the right place. Just to introduce myself real quick here. My name is Jess Lella. I am a solutions engineer here at Tableau. So what that means is I help customers use the product, implement, really training, kind of all of the above related to the product. And for today, we are going to do 30 tips in 30 minutes. So emphasis on newer features as well. I'll be calling those out as I go. And typically this is a pretty rapid fire session. So I'm going to go fast, but this is recorded. And at the end, I'm going to show you where you can get this workbook. And let's get started. So everything you see today, it's meant to be done in a minute or less. So we'll jump right in, and plenty of time for questions at the end, like Alex noted. So this is all the 30 tips. We'll talk about them, each one in more detail. So tip number 1 is a toggle button or a collapsible zone. You could also think about it like that. So I know we all love our filters, our legends, and they're great, but sometimes they take up a lot of space. So you can now bring in a floating object container, vertical or horizontal, drop in those filters, those legends. Again, I'm only doing 3, but you could do as many as you'd like. So I'll go ahead and I'll find that container. Normal life scenario, I'd probably format this a little bit more, but this is good enough for now. So what you can do is in that container is say, okay, add a show and a hide button. And this little guy pops up. And we'll format it, but just so you can see how it works, all click shows, all click hides. I'm a big proponent of going ahead and edit it. I know we have a few extra minutes, so I'll take a little more time here. You could do an image, you could do text, you know, customize the text for when an item's shown or hidden. So when it's shown, we could say hide the filters. When it's shown, we could say show them. And then again, with more time, you could go ahead, change the border, put some color on it, but for today's purposes, this will do. So again, nice and handy, it gives you some nice polish. I'm a big fan of them. So now you know how to do it. Floating objects. Next up is how can you make a KPI header in under a minute? So this is a best practice. That's why I threw it in here. Just grab, you can control select, grab all the measures that you want. You don't even need to put on measure names because we'll let Tableau do that for us when you show me with that reporting view. Go ahead and swap your orientation, make it nice and big, and we'll throw that onto our dashboard. There it is. It looks pretty great when you add an action filter to it. So that's a best practice, and it's super simple to do to see those high-level metrics. Tip number 3, adding an information button. I'm a big fan of this one because sometimes, you know, we make dashboards and we think, oh, of course you know where to click, or you know how to use this, or you know what this means. Well, a lot of your end users probably don't. You don't want to take up all this text space, precious dashboard real estate. Use a button instead. So drop any metric on detail, change your marks card to a shape, then give your shape, you know, something other than what the default palette is. So the little light bulb is built in. I personally put in a different light bulb that's a little more crisp. That's just my own preference. And then that info is driven by your tooltip. So you could say, anything. Thanks for attending. Questions at the end. I've seen some customers write literally paragraphs in this. So again, it's really whatever you'd like. So then we just go ahead and we drop this guy right onto our dashboard. So let's go ahead and put that somewhere. And I'm going to do tiled. Again, it's going to be kind of big and ugly. We're going to fix that in a second here. Whatever, we'll put it there. Again, not taking the most time I normally would to format, but there we go. There's your information button. You can also use like an I, a question mark, something that's intuitive for your end users. Next up, tip number 4 is you can drop in files on desktop, and this works in server as well. So let me grab my little directory here. So our next data set we are going to work with is on national parks. So if you were like me and you couldn't do your normal vacations this year, I went to quite a few national parks and I got pretty into it. So for the majority of this session, we're going to look at national park data. So this next tip number 5, is just click tricks. They're little clicks, almost like hotkeys that can really save you some time. So right-clicking asks you how you'd like to aggregate. Again, just saves you a little extra effort than actually dropping into the field menu. You can also do that for dimensions. Right-click and, you know, how many parks do we have? All right, 48. Let's add, our next one is control-clicking duplicates. So I use this one probably the most. So I know you guys can't see it, but I'm holding down my control key and I'm putting this field, you know, really in multiple places. Going back to our dashboard we were just working on, shift-click floats. So I purposely put this as a tiled object so I could show you guys how you can float it. So now I can just move this around, shift click, again, just saves you a little bit extra effort, those little click tricks, and it makes you look kind of, you know, kind of like a pro. All right, that brings us to tip number 6, which is a lollipop chart. So as many of us are aware, when you bring on your fields, Tableau automatically makes a bar chart. And that's usually is a great fit for your data. But if you're kind of sick of seeing bar charts, you just want to jazz them up, lollipop charts are a great way to do that. So again, duplicate your measure like we just did. We're going to dual axis, synchronize, and hide our header because we don't want to see it twice. And now we have 2 marks cards to work with. One will be a bar chart. Make it nice and skinny so you get that lollipop look and feel. And then have your second marks be a circle. And again, blow up those circles. Again, I'm not going to do it for time's sake, but it looks really slick to put a label in, maybe like a percent of total. It gives you that opportunity to put in more context without adding too much clutter. And then you also have 2 marks cards to, again, just add a little richer detail. So I'm a big fan of lollipop charts. I make almost all my bar charts. I usually end up making lollipop charts, or about half of them. All right, next up, tip number 7, using custom shapes. So custom shapes always look pretty slick. It looks like, you know, you're a real pro and people respond to them pretty well when they see them on the dashboard. So how do you use them? How do we make one, a visual with them? So anyone who downloads Tableau Desktop, you get a Tableau repository. And you might not have poked around in here, but there's a few folders, shapes being one of them. The majority of these are built in, but you can see 2 here are ones that I created. It's as simple as that. You create a folder, you drop in a JPEG or a PNG, and then you can use those in your dashboard. So I'm going to take my top 7 or so most visited parks. I'll make this bigger for you guys. And now we're going to put a custom shape right on our, oops, wrong one, sorry guys, on our little circle. So we're going to replace our lollipop with a custom shape. So change your marks card to shape, and then we need to give that shape something to work with. That'll be our parks. And the other tip here is when your shape name in your repository here matches exactly to your field name, which it does in this case, you don't have to assign the palette. Tableau automatically knows to take the right image. So we'll assign the palette. We'll say okay. I'll blow this up nice and big so we can see it. And there we go. Tableau got it right. Just to verify here, that looks correct. So again, lots of places you can use custom shapes. Again, I put it at the end of a bar chart, but you can start getting creative with where you want to put them. Tip number 8, this is one of those newer features. It's been out, but it is somewhat newer, and that's explain data. So explain data is awesome for doing exactly what it kind of says, explain data. So when you see a mark that just seems like an outlier or it doesn't really make sense, sure, you could go ahead and dig in and try to figure it out, but now we have a nifty new feature, and that's explain data. It's that little light bulb you get on your tooltip. So in this case, if someone's noticed, you know, it seems kind of odd that the Smoky Mountains is by and far the most visited park of all time. I would have thought like Grand Canyon or something like that, Yosemite. So let's have explain data try to explain that for us. And Tableau does get it right. I will caveat, it sometimes doesn't always get it right if there's just not enough information there. But in this case, we do have an explanation, and that is because it is the only park that has free entry. And I looked this up just to be sure. Apparently there's a highway, and if you go on the highway, you count as a visitor. So it is a little deceiving, but it was awesome that Tableau figured that out for us. Next up is using vector tiles. Again, this is if you're using maps. Hopefully you've already discovered this. It's pretty awesome because it's so easy to use, just really 2 clicks, and you can make your maps just that much more rich. So here's all our national parks. When I go to the Maps tab, you'll notice our background maps, we have a few other options. So light, normal, dark, that's been around for years, but now we have street view, satellite view, outdoors, and the level of detail is pretty impressive. So I think most of us are in Chicago, right? So if I zoom into Chicago, let's go over here to like that Millennial Park area. I mean, you get down to like locations, street names, points of interest. It's pretty cool. I also like the satellite as well. More of a terrain view. Again, a little different, but really some really nice detail there as well. Okay, I'm just going to flip this back to normal for our next tip, which is buffer zones. So we added a lot of functions for how we can work with maps. So I'll flip over to a map view. And in this case, I'm trying to look for, again, that buffer, that radius. So that had been a big request for a while. So this is a newer feature, and I just have it here. So I'll call this buffer zone. Oops, wrong calc. Let me go ahead and grab it just for time's sake so you don't have to watch me write it all out. So make a buffer around my latitude and longitude, my park. This miles is parameterized, doesn't have to be, and show me this in miles. Again, you could use any unit, but miles makes sense. Drop that on detail, and let's zoom into, let's say California, so because there's a lot of parks in California. So now I can see, let's add the park name again. You know, what's that buffer zone driven by that parameter? Maybe I only want to stay at an Airbnb that's, you know, within 26 miles. Again, a lot more business use cases than just this. But if you're working with maps and you've been looking for this, there you go. You don't have to make any crazy calculations to do it. All right, I'm going to just reset my map here because we are going to use it again in a bit. Sorry, my magnifier out of the way. All right, tips number 11 through 13. These are going to be more dashboard tips. So first one is making those collapsible zones. I know we saw collapsible objects, but it looks really awesome when you can click on something and a report shows, then it collapses. So the way we do that is we use an object, drop it in, and we need to make sure our sheets are inside of that object. So we'll highlight kind of blue. Let's use our map that we just made. Again, make sure it's inside the layout container. That is key. Hide your titles. And what we are going to say here is dashboard actions. So if anyone has made actions before, you may be familiar with this already, but I'll show you what the little trick here is. So again, when we click on our bar chart, show me my map. Key here is make sure you exclude. That is going to be the secret. So now when I click on Smoky Mountains, there it is in Tennessee, and then it collapses, it doesn't show. So that's a really nice feature. I see it with reporting a lot as well. Show the report when you want to see it, hide it. Also has performance implications because now you're not loading every single sheet and all the data. You're now, you know, filtering it out, which is awesome. All right, tip number 12. This is dynamic URLs. So maybe this would be pretty cool is if when I click on, say, Yellowstone, I see the National Park Service information on the park. This is also a lot of business use cases for this, but the way we do it is we will drop in a web page, and this will be static for now. We'll change it. And that is also driven by a dashboard action. So we'll give that a second to load. And again, this is static. Again, when I click on Acadia, this is not going to change because I'm not telling Tableau how to do that. So I'll go to dashboard, actions again, and we are going to this time add a URL action that is not static. And it's these little touches and polishes that take your dashboard to the next level. So we'll say go to MPS 4. And again, these little, just little tips here. This isn't the tip, but you know, dynamic titles, dynamic menu items, that's what really takes your dashboard to the next level. So in the URL, we have to find what would be parameterized. So sometimes this is tricky. This is an easier example where park name, that's how the URL is built. So everyone's is going to be different. And let's have this be on a menu. And now let's click on Acadia. There it is in Maine. Hover over. And this will update and will be National Park Service for Acadia. There you go. All right, last tip for this dashboard, tip number 13 is pick screen color. So this is really handy when, especially if you want to match like a logo, like your company's logo to a color, or you see a color that you like, but it's not in Tableau's color format palette. You can pick your screen color, and this is something I actually discovered later in my Tableau career, and I really wish I had seen it sooner. So again, here's your colors, you know, you're used to seeing, but I'm surprised how long it took me to just say, hey, pick screen colors. Maybe I would want to match this nice maroon color. We'll say, okay, and there we go. Now it kind of looks like it's filling in as if it's on the website itself. Same works for, again, inside your bar charts, inside of your bar chart. Again, I could pick really any color. Maybe I'd want this to match, you know, my green. I'm not going to do it, but I think you guys get the point. And then it saves it right here, so you could keep reusing it. So I find that to be really handy because sometimes the color palettes we have in Tableau are good, but sometimes you just need a little more. All right, tip number 14, and this is one that I see pretty often with my customers that I'm helping, is they don't, it's maybe you want to see these grid lines in the back and you want to see, you know, your zero lines and your axis titles aren't updated. sometimes I think people just don't know where to go to fix it. So I just think, personal opinion, it looks cleaner to not have the grid line. So right click, format, this little kind of 3 stacked bars. It's just as simple as turning them off. Do you want to see the 0 lines? In this case, it doesn't really make sense. Instead, a little tip here is we could go to our axis rulers and make a nice thick axis line, and that can kind of add the same effect. In that same vein of formatting or axes or grid lines, I can't tell you how often I see our measures and axes titles, just kind of keeping that, if it's a calc, like sum of count distinct, visitors. I did update this earlier, so we don't see it that messy, but just double click and edit your title. It updates in real time. And sometimes just telling your titles, you avoid so much confusion as to what you're seeing. So again, I'm saying visitors, but is this for 2020 of all time, last 5 years? So I could say visitors of all time. And that could just clear up a lot of confusion as to what your users are looking at. So again, I suggest taking the time, doing those little updates. They can go a long way. Okay, tip number 15. This is one of my favorites because it's a fun one, and it's working with Unicode characters. So Unicode characters are, they're text characters. So you can treat them just like you would if you were copy and pasting, letters. So we're working with national parks, so why don't we use a little wolf here? And you can drop these things really anywhere inside of your field names. You could put them in your titles, and you can just Google Unicode character libraries, and there's a ton out there. And sometimes these are just easier than, say, dropping in an image, or you just want to be a little playful. There's a ton of different characters out there, and I use them pretty often. Also for bulleting lists, like, in Microsoft Office, you can bullet. It's kind of hard to do in Tableau. You can just grab a Unicode character that's a bullet and make a little bulleted list. Again, I used some that were a little funny, but there you go, Unicode characters. Okay, next up, we'll talk about some date formatting. This is kind of a quick one, but again, it's something I see people not really doing very often with their date axes. Is right-click, format. And sure, you could use the standard automatic. These certainly work. But you can get creative with how you make your dates look, and let's say custom format. And notice, maybe I just want to clean up, my axes. I'm all about less is more. So maybe we just want that to be like that, year, year, year. Oh no, sorry, I meant to why. But we'll take in whatever you say. So maybe we want our date format to look like that. Something people don't really see very often, but super simple to do. All right. Next up is saving a data source. So I use this one a lot, especially when I know I'm going to the same data source often, which most of us probably are. And sure, you could go to the connection and find it, but you could save yourself a little bit of effort just right-clicking on a data source that you use often and just say add to save data sources. And notice you'll have to save it somewhere. That's all right. When I go to open up a new workbook, it is right there and handy for me. I'll give it a second to open. While that's opening, I just need to do a quick little thing here so our next one works. Okay. Where is that? Did you open Tableau? There you go. So when I connect to data with that saved data source, notice there it is right there under my saved data sources. And if you ever realize you just don't want it there anymore, you just exit out. It's that easy. So again, nice little tip there. All right, next up is Visit Tooltip. And this is not too new. I'm sure some of you are already using it or have seen it, but if you haven't, I just like to show people again because looks really, really polished, and it also adds context without having to, again, take up all that precious dashboard real estate. So let's drop this Visit Tooltip on our bar chart here. So again, go into your tooltip, and again, you could update your tooltip to your heart's delight, but really what I want to show you today is how do you drop in a sheet. So insert sheet, find that Visit Tooltip, and again, give it a little preview. You can also change the size. So if you're stacking multiple sheets, which you can do, again, I could add as many sheets as I'd like. I'm not going to do it, but I have seen some customers add as many as like 3 or 4, make the size really big, and then you just, again, you're not taking up space on your dashboard. So this looks pretty good. And now when I hover over, I can see how our park attendance has changed over time for each of these parks, rather than having this be an entirely separate sheet on your dashboard. Vision Tooltip is a great way to just, again, add that pop of context, and it looks really polished as well when you are demoing or presenting. Okay, tip number 19, ask data or embed ask data. So ask data is relatively new, not too new. Here, let me get this out of the way. So some of you may have seen it. If you haven't, I will give you a little demo of it, but that is not actually what the tip is here. So again, ask data, it's asking questions in really natural language, as if I was asking, again, like a person. So really simple question like, how many parks are there? Tableau will anticipate your question and give you an answer. Again, I'm not dragging and dropping in a viz, I'm just asking that question. So there we go, there's our answer. But what's new, and the tip here, is we can now embed this. So we can put our ask data interface in a dashboard. We could put it in a portal. You could put it in an iframe. There's a lot you can do, and you don't have to leave the Tableau experience. So we'll drop it in as a web page, put in that URL we just grabbed, and then we'll have Ask Data right in our dashboard. You could also have a button that then brings you to Ask Data. A lot of ways we could do this. Again, sometimes it takes a second to load here, but it will eventually load for me. Come on now. I'll have to authenticate, again, just like you normally would when you're accessing server. Just making sure we're secure here. And then we can start asking questions right here without ever leaving our Tableau dashboard. So a question I might have is, what are my top 5 biggest parks? Sorry guys, there's a little lag here. What are the top 5 biggest parks? And there we go. And there is my answer. So Denali, all these parks in Alaska, and I think there's another one down here, or maybe that's it. There it is. So pretty cool. Tableau got it right. So think about it, if you're using Ask Data, you can now embed it, which is, again, really handy and, again, looks really slick on your polished executive-ready dashboards. Tip number 20, label customizing. So I'm sure we are all familiar with our labels on our marks card, and often I see people's journey stop here, where they, change the color, change the font, and that certainly works, but sometimes you need that additional layer of customizing or tailoring. So what a lot of people don't know is if you click on these little ellipses, that brings you into, really endless possibilities of how you can customize your labels. Again, maybe I want to say, how many parks, just make it really clear. Maybe I want this one to be bold. So again, you might not want everything to be the same size and color. Well, you can use that label, little ellipses, to do that again. So I'm just going to do something whatever, kind of silly. And hey, while we're at it, because we're talking about Unicode characters, they could even drop in a Unicode character if you want. So again, a lot you can do with customizing labels. Maybe you want this one to be flush left, flush right. When I was starting at Tableau, there were some times that I was like, why can't I get this one to go on the left and this to go on the right, or space it out differently? You'd be really constricted if you were just using this interface. You'd really want to use the little ellipses to get that look and feel that you need. All right, tip number 21 is a line bubble chart. Pretty similar to the lollipop chart we were just looking at. It just adds an effect to your line charts, especially when you're working with time. So again, we're going to dual axis and duplicate the same measure, synchronize and hide. Oops, don't want to edit axis, so I want to hide it. And what we are going to do here is we are going to make our second marks card a circle. And what the circle does is it just adds that effect, and it's also a great opportunity to then say add a label, which can be fit in nicely on that little circle there. So again, just a nice little touch to your line charts. It's so easy to do. It takes literally 5 seconds to make a bubble line chart. And again, you can add that little additional context as well. Maybe you want our circle to then be color coded. So you can take, you know, a time series that you might be using really often and just add that little extra touch to it and give people, again, some options for adding labels or color context. So think about that one if you are using time often. All right, next tip number 22, and this is, again, one of my favorites. Anyone who's living in SQL and just wishes Tableau had that in operator, and I'll explain what that means in a sec here. We now have it, so this is new. This is pretty much brand new. This came out in our latest version. So now in Calcs, you can say, is something in something? Is this in a set, in a group, in a field, like I'm doing here? So in this case, I want to say, okay, is this a park that I've been to? So these are all the parks I've been to. I've got a long way to go to get to all of them, but nonetheless, I'm going to color code them. Previously, if I wanted to do this, it was certainly possible, but I would have to make a big if statement, a big if else statement, and you know, this is just so much simpler. And there's a lot of places we can use it. Again, sets, groups, fields, and again, there I go, drop it on color, and I'm off to the races. Tip number 23, table improvements. So this was a big ask. This was on our ideas forum for years, that people want to go more than 16 columns. Well, now you can do it. And this is relatively new. It came out late last year, but you do need to know how to turn it on. So under analysis, table layout, advanced, and there you go. You can crank both of these up to 50, and you will have no issues making those big tabular reports. Again, I have some customers that I work with that upgraded just for this feature. So just be aware that it's there and how to get there. Tip number 24, animations. Again, relatively new feature. I'm a huge fan of animations. I am by pretty much putting them on all my dashboards these days. So how do we get there? Format, because it's not really intuitive, I think, under format, but there it is. Animations, by default, they are turned off. I'll turn them on. We can select our duration. Let's say medium, so we can really see it here. So we want to see over time how our parks have changed in attendance. So notice that it's just a little bit different look, you know, and feel to our normal, if I was just filtering. And I can do the same on my bar chart as well. It works with any action, you know, on a viz. So again, think about animations. They look really awesome, especially when you're presenting. All right, copy formatting. This is, again, one of those tips that I discovered later in life with my Tableau journey. So again, I think we all know you can copy and duplicate a tab, but this copy formatting can also be your best friend. Copy format, notice I have some like kind of odd formatting here. If I go and find another bar chart, let's use any one of these. Here, we'll use my explain data one because that one matches. So I don't say copy, I say paste formatting. And notice, there I go. There I have my formatting, because certainly it saved me a lot of time. And server tips, and I know I'm watching the clock, I'll try to go fast. All right, we'll talk the last 4 or 5 are server tips. So let's get into it here. All right. So first one is a custom start page on a custom view. So notice I'm on a Tableau Online site. This is typically what you would see. Your favorites, your recents, but you can customize what your start page looks like and even have that be a custom view. So watch what happens when I go to my other site. It takes a sec to load here. Come on. I'm automatically brought to a viz. So you can have your start page be whatever you'd like. How did I get there? Well, maybe I want New York to be what I land on. This is a COVID tracking dashboard. It's obviously not up to date, but we can go with it. Again, I'll make a custom view. I'll say, you know, NY, save, and then I'll go to my little icon here and say, make this my start page. And now every time I log in, I'm landed right here. Next tip, making metrics, and this is new as well. This came out this year. It was a big ask, and metrics are kind of KPIs, metrics that you track often, and you might not want to go to a dashboard to find and filter to the number. We just want it right there in real time. So maybe I want to see my New York City COVID numbers, as a metric. I'll just create it. I'll call this, NYC COVID. And this also looks great on mobile devices. And there we go. So I'll actually go to take a look at what the metrics look like, just so you can see it. So there's a ton of metrics made on this server, but there you go. You can see them all and every 60 minutes, if it's a live data source, it's refreshed. Otherwise, it sticks to your extract schedule. Okay, next up is making extracts on your server. This one is, in my opinion, one of the most powerful features that we have rolled out. So if anyone who's made an extract that's really big on your laptop, your poor little laptop is taking on that burden until it is on the server. Well, now notice if your data is live, connected to a database, doesn't work for flat files, you have to have your credentials embedded. If all of that fits, you can go ahead and run the extract right on server. So publish live, then make the extract on server. This has been a big benefit for many customers. Let me see, did I finish that? Oh, upload a workbook from server, almost forgot that one. All right, you can also now upload a workbook right from server. So you can skip the whole, going into desktop, publishing. You can just do it right here. Choose your file and you are good to go. Again, I won't go through it, but I think you guys get the point. We just upload it and there you go, you're published. All right, my last tip, and that is using Tableau Public. And if you don't know about Tableau Public, I'll put the URL in the chat. This is an awesome resource for creating content, getting ideas, reverse engineering. You can go into almost any dashboard, and most of them you can download and see how was it built. And I can't tell you how many ideas and just how do you do that? How do you do this? I got from Tableau Public, and I'm sure Lindsay can attest to it. I'm sure she has a pretty awesome Tableau Public profile. And that brings me to my own profile where you can download this workbook. So again, everything you saw today, again, I'll put in my little name, but I'm pretty easy to find. And you can go ahead and download this workbook, see how I built everything. And this is the finished copy of everything we just did today. So on that note, I think we're kind of on time here, maybe a little bit over. Time for any questions. Alex, how much time do we have now? I think I might have went a little slower, but I know we have a little extra time. So
Lindsay, as long as you're okay, we're fine. We have plenty of time in the meeting.
Okay,
Lindsay,
great.
Are you all right with us having maybe 10 minutes for questions?
Sure, it's fine with me.
Cool. Okay. Well, again, I was not really paying attention to the Q&A, but if you have questions,
all right. Well, let's go ahead and start with them.
Chat it. Yeah, take yourself off mute, right? Let's see, did I miss anything?
Hold on. I am going to steal the share. Yeah,
okay.
I will share my screen. And again, I'm going to put, yeah.
Okay, I'll stop sharing.
You see my screen now?
I can see the screen. Yep, okay, so sharing the workbook, perfect. Oh yeah, let me put this in the chat. Yes, go to my profile and I'll show you where to get this workbook. I'll put that in right now.
Yes, someone asked this question, so I'll put it in there. Yeah, that's fine. Someone put that in the chat, so I just added the question up here. But anyone else who wants to post a question, I posted the link multiple times to the Q&A, but we've got these here.
Okay, I put it in the chat. I think if you guys can see that.
If we look at the meeting invite, we've got your public profile link right there.
Oh, perfect. Okay, you can find it there.
Yeah, with the great picture as well. So there you go. There's the link. We'll go back. So yes, well here. I'll grab that link, copy link address. I'm going to put it in, I think, as a comment.
Oh, perfect.
Okay.
And then I think I saw
Here
something
we
about a
are. So I've got the comment.
food-themed biz. What is it about food?
Well,
Yes, lollipop, donut, pie charts. Yeah, those are all good ones. How do we interchange
that
chart to tabular? Thanks, Lindsay, for putting that in there.
Yeah, I have a whole food themed chart workbook that folks can take a peek at. It seemed
Awesome.
appropriate to share.
I would love to see that. I'm a big fan of all things food. Although I would say for Viz, I like chocolate bars more than donuts as far as Viz goes. But
yeah, so I've got the pie and the lollipop and donut. We also have a waffle chart and the plum pudding chart. So there's actually 5 in that one, all with directions on how to bake them. So
that is awesome. I would love to see that. Sorry, Jess, did you get to that interchange question?
Hold on, no, yeah, I was looking at the other one from a role, direct upload workbook to server. Oh, sorry, that version. Let me find out which one. We're released every quarter, so sometimes I have to keep my head straight. Which one? It's 2020.2. Yeah, okay, so 2020.2. So this spring, about this spring, it came out. So pretty new. So yeah, if you're not upgraded yet, you're going to have to be on 2020.2.
I just put it in the comments. Anyone who wants to see that answer, it's there.
Okay, perfect. All right, how do we interchange chart to tabular data? How do we export that to Excel? Yeah, so I usually use that little on Show Me, that report. And then once you are in Tableau, you can go to, there's a few ways you could do it. You go to Worksheet, Export, you could cross tab to Excel or Data. If you want to, yeah, I would use a Worksheet, Export, cross tab to Excel would probably work just fine for you.
Lindsay posted the food themed Viz link, so I put that in the comment to that question. That question, by the way, was my test question, but it ended up generating some interest, which is awesome.
That's funny.
All right, and again, these questions could be really anything Tableau related. Doesn't even have to be something that you saw today. So let me put a link for that exporting while we wait for anything else to come in here. I am going to put in the chat, Alex says, I don't know if I'm in the right place to add a comment. So you could put that URL in the comment there for your question there about downloading. It will go to a CSV, by the way, not Excel, but you could, of course, just change it.
So downloading. What is this for?
Downloading from Tableau to Excel.
Oh, I see. How do we change? Oh, yeah. Yeah. It says it was my question, but actually came from someone else.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I put that comment in there. So anyone who goes to the question link, not only can you ask questions, but you can see the answers in the comments there. So, well, for most of them.
Yeah, we also have, I can't say that I've tested this out as an export. We also have, it was pretty new feature, I want to say 2020.2, where there is an export. I could share my screen again. I don't know if we have time, but there's a download object now where you can export as data. So that could be also as a crosstab. So that could be interesting as well.
Well, I'll ask a question just for myself as well, but I'm sure some other people. So the 30 tips in 30 minutes, which is super awesome. And you've got like rapid fire and there's tons of great tips. Everyone, this is recorded and we mentioned that a few times, so you can go back and watch it in slow motion again. But when you see all this knowledge that you've accumulated, and I'm sure Lindsay as well and other people, how would you say that you've what is the way that has worked the best for you in learning new stuff? Do you just rummage around, like you said, in Tableau Public and look at tips there and figure it out yourself, or watch YouTube videos? What do you do?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's a mix. I would say most is so much of my days are spent helping customers. So like people like you on the phone here that come to us with problems, issues, and it just forces you to learn. And yes, definitely looking at Tableau Public has been an awesome resource for me. And yeah, it's really just kind of diving in or knowing you want to do something, like you have a use case, you know what you want to do or how you want something to look, and then just going for it. And Tableau has an amazing community, as we can see here with 86 people. If you Google almost anything, there's some sort of answer out there. Like our Zen masters like Lindsay are so active in the forums, and they really take their time to, answer questions, like uploading workbooks to our help forums. And that has been a godsend sometimes to me. Like I can tell you, even today, 4 years later, I'll get questions and I'll be Googling it just like you guys do. So yeah, it's just, building, helping, researching, all of the above.
Thank you. We did get another new question come in the Q&A that I reposted over here from Mistera, best practices for blending. If you can see, it's the third one on the list there.
Okay, 2020.1. Yeah, so you are just one version away from our release of relationships, which is going to be super helpful for you. So blending can be tricky. It can have performance implications, and that would probably be from Sarah, something that if you know who your account rep is, if you don't, shoot me a message. You might want to just talk to us about like specifically what's going on, because there are some limitations with blending, and sometimes there's just not really a great way around it, except for joining. So joining your data might be a better option, but then joining can have its own, nuances as well. I think you'll be really happy to see what we release in 2020.2. A lot of issues I had when I was blending, I'm now using relationships. It's fixed a lot of my problems with like data duplicating, aggregation issues. So yeah, I think we have to kind of look at what you're doing specifically and see if we could help out. So maybe we could take that one offline, get in touch with your rep, get in touch with me. I'll find out who your rep is and we could talk about it. Did I get another question? What would be the best way to add a logo or image to a worksheet header? I would drag in, I usually use image objects. So on your dashboard, just image objects are great. You could also, like you saw me do that custom shape trick, you could also put your logo in as a shape and do it that way. So a few ways.
I'm just checking. I don't see this one in the Q&A, what you've already answered. There's nothing new in the chat. So with that, I think, Jess, I would say thank you again. That was a super awesome session. And thanks for doing it. And
thank you.
If no one else has any questions at the moment, we're going to continue on to Lindsay's session. And I'll leave this chat link will be out there. This pigeonhole is out there for new questions. Actually, we can leave these here. But I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to pass it to Lindsay.
Okay.
The chartiest desserts ever. I love it.
I know. So I might as well share it while we're here because we're just talking about. So and then it tells you exactly how to make it and an example. So for all of you, so it was fun. I think I did this like over Christmas one year, maybe because of the time of the year. But anyhow, all right. Let's see if I can. You see this okay? Yeah, good, okay. Cool.
Yep, that's great.
Awesome. All right, so I'm gonna go into kind of a sort of deep dive on my recent iron biz, which is called The Importance of Sleep, which you can see here at the bottom. And I tend to leave my presentations with a little disclaimer, and this particular one is, I put this together like yesterday, so I hope it goes off without a hitch, but that is because my head is hiding a very large, well, no, that's not very large, but there's a big hole in my ceiling. 2 weeks ago, we had a huge flood that flooded all 3 stories of my house. And so I am currently, my office is now in my living room / kitchen. So I think I'm doing a good job of like not showing the back of my house, but my office was completely, it has like no walls now, and so it's super fun. So that being said, things were a little crazy for 2 weeks until we moved back into our house, and so here we are, but I still think this is going to be fun, and I got a lot of tips and tricks as well to show through this, as well as kind of how I thought through this process of my iron biz. Jessica had a number of great tricks, some of which I'm actually going to talk a little bit about as well here. So that's pretty cool, because maybe I'll give them a little more time than the quick minute we went through. Okay. So for the folks who do not know me, my name is Lindsay Betzendahl. You can find me on Twitter at Betzendahl Data. I'm a consultant at a company called Health Data Viz. Particularly, we do visualizations for healthcare organizations. I'm also a Tableau Zen Master, Tableau Public Ambassador, both last year and this year. And I'm an associate professor at Temple University, where I teach a data visualization class. I've been using Tableau for a long time, but before that, I actually was a behavioral health clinician. I was a licensed marriage and family therapist, believe it or not, if you hadn't heard, and transitioned into data analytics and visualization about 7 years ago. So I'm the founder of Project Health Biz, so I really love healthcare, I really love data, I love visualizing it, so I made it into even a personal project that other folks are, join in and visualize that data. I also used to live outside of Chicago, so I have to give a shout out to there. I lived in Naperville for 10 years in my younger years, so haven't been back in a while, but it's a great city. Okay, so let's talk first about the creating and designing of my iron biz, the importance of sleep. So first, a little bit about my iron biz history. May not be what you think, but so I started out in 2018. Awesome. Yeah, so I actually drew this as well, but I got into, this is part of it, I got into a lot of drawing more recently. I'm not very good at it, but I started learning how to use Procreate, but I'll get to that. So in 2018, I submitted my first feeder on books and literature, which was not a topic I was interested in, but I did that. Then I did the second feeder that same year, which was on health and well-being, interestingly enough. In 2019, I totally missed all the feeders because I had my second son, who just turned 3. He's super cute. Okay, enough about him. So I missed all of them. And then finally, again in 2020, I submitted for the only feeder that there was this year on health and wellness, also a topic that I really enjoy. So what I want to talk about in relation to those 3 iron visits I did is kind of my journey of how I have changed kind of my layout of those visits. So the first one I did was your typical regular size dashboard. It literally is probably the size, a typical letter portrait, likely maybe slightly longer, but definitely not your, if you look at iron viz submissions, a lot of them are super long form, very, very long. I actually have never done one like that, interestingly enough. So this was my first one. At the time, I really didn't like the topic. It was hard to get into it, but I actually like poetry a lot. I was a psychology and an English major in college. And so what I chose to do is look at women, Pulitzer Prize winners in poetry. And then the cool thing was I did all these custom shapes, similar to Jessica's example trick. I got all these women's pictures, put them in custom shapes, and was able to make this chart where you could click on an individual and read one of her poems. So I thought that was cool, but super simple, regular dashboard. The next one I did in 2018 was a wide form dashboard, which is very unusual. I've only seen a few of them. It's actually pretty wide. It's very cluttered, like looking back on it. I was just trying to throw every cool thing I could think of that I had learned at the time 2 years ago onto the page. I had a spot where you can make your own baby food by selecting different parameters and the food would change. I had a jump plot about the length and time between each breastfeeding session of my son, which gave me a headache trying to build. I had my son's clothing for 72 days of color and type and other strange charts. Kind of just try to throw everything in. It was still fun. It was different. Here you can see kind of switching, making your own baby food, looking at what my kid wore. But this last one I really enjoyed a lot more, and I went into this mobile version. Here are all the pages of this particular one that we're going to go through. And I like this the best. One, I like the colors, I like the charts, I like the topic, but I really like this idea of doing a mobile version for IronViz because I'm kind of anti-long form, as I just think everybody does it for IronViz, but probably don't do it at any other point. But mobile vizes, you may have to do that for work. We're so used to seeing different types of data visualizations on your mobile device, like in the real world, and I thought this would be a really neat test and opportunity for me to, try to see what I could do. But it didn't start out so easy. So I didn't get this idea overnight. I don't usually get my ideas overnight. I had a conversation with my friend, Zach Bowders, and he was asking me if I was going to even participate this year. And he was asking do I ever want to, or do I just feel like I'm expected to here? And I tell him nothing's sparking my interest. I'm just tired. I enjoy data, but nothing's coming to me. I said, I just need to tell myself not to overthink this and find a story and explore data. But I wasn't a good planner, and I started drawing, and I wasn't getting into viz, and I was having a really hard time thinking about what to do. So yes, of course, eventually I had an idea. So the idea came from a number of different aspects, and I tell this story because this is pretty much how I do things, even at at work. Even when I have a client, I tend to scour the internet or think of new opportunities to visualize something. So I saw this particular image on Dribble, or sometimes I look for website design, app designs, and I got an idea about this number thing on the side where I thought, well, maybe people can put in what time they go to bed, and we could do this really cool, complicated thing where they press buttons and it looks like it scrolls with some animations. And I was really going off the deep end trying to do this like number thing, which did not make it into the final viz anyhow. But I started with this idea of a mobile app that would give information about sleep and perhaps even collect information. I was kind of not quite clear exactly where I was headed, but that was kind of the start. So I started to think about what was I into in the moment, right? What did I really feel passionate about? What was going to drive some creativity? So as I said, the design aspect is I had been searching on Dribble a lot more often than I had in the past for some ideas. So that was the first thing, is I got the kind of app or the mobile version idea as something I would try for IronViz. I've done mobile version designs before, but not necessarily for an IronViz. Then I thought about curved charts. Now we see a lot of those in IronViz. People do often do some interesting, unusual chart types in that competition. But I had this chord-ish diagram that I had originally built for work, and then we never used it. So I still wanted to use the concept. So I kind of got stuck on, I really want to use this in my IronViz. The next was space. So I had started to use Procreate, and as you saw in that image of like the rocket ship going around a planet, there was a lot of folks out there that I was following and looking at and how they were drawing in Procreate, and using space and the moon and things like that were an easy way to learn how to draw, because you could use a lot of different of the brushes and making space and shading and all. So that was just something that I had been doing more recently, so it's kind of a topic on my mind. The last thing is sleep, and that's because I don't get a lot of it because of my kids. So sleep is always something I'm interested in because I'm interested in getting more of it. And I thought, well, that might be some data that I could collect. as well as some interesting facts and data about sleep and how it benefits us and how we do it and all kinds of things. So here are a couple pictures of my kids sleeping because I wish they slept more. And I take pictures when they are sleeping because they look cute, but they wake me up a lot. This was actually a visit I had done before about my oldest son's inability to sleep when we first moved, and he would wake up multiple times a night. And so these segments are for, like a week and a half. I would wake up and clock when he went to bed, how many hours until he woke up again, then hours until he woke up again. And so you can see on Wednesday, like the first segment is probably 3 hours, and he slept for another 3 hours, and he slept for an hour, then maybe less than an hour, then an hour, like up every hour. It was horrible. He sleeps now for the night, but he's 7. Okay, so those are kind of like the fragments of the idea that I had. And then again, so why mobile? Well, as I said, I was kind of tired and I was anti-long form, so I wanted to do something that's a little different. And granted, it didn't win anything. I'm still happy with it because I think it just challenged some of the norms of doing these long form vizzes, and that you could still have a mobile version entry into the Iron Viz competition. I didn't really want to be predictable, so I wanted to do something, like I said, that was a little different. Here are 2 other examples that I have done. So here's kind of like the idea that came about. So I mentioned there was this mobile app, there was this design aspect that I was getting into. I found some charts and graphs on body temperature and melatonin and how these 2 intersect when we sleep. I found some information on moon phases from NOAA, and I was like, I'm curious if I don't sleep well on, like the moon cycles, like that affects sleep. And here's the Chord example that I had that I did for work that I really wanted to incorporate. So maybe this is totally scattered, but that would be totally appropriate for me. But this is how I tend to think about things. I don't start often with the data. I start with all these other aspects and try to build them all together once I have the data. So the first thing I'm going to show is how I use Figma to develop and design this app background. So I'm actually going to tell you, and then I'm going to show you how it was done. If you don't know Figma, it's a free online web application, similar sort of to using PowerPoint or using Illustrator, but it's completely free and web-based, and I find it very simple to use. So I created these little buttons to use in my visualization. Okay. So creating the button. So we're used to using buttons on mobile devices, like actual mobile devices all the time. And so I wanted to create that same experience of clicking on a button and seeing it depress as if you were really clicking on a real button in real life, as you do on your keyboard. And so basically the way this is done is you're just adding in some different drop shadows and inner shadows to create this illusion. And so the way I've done this in Figma, and again, I'll show in a second, is we have one button that is for when the button is raised. And this is using just 2 drop shadows, a black gray shadow on the bottom right, and on the top left, a white one. And so you can kind of see that there. And then we make a depressed button. And the depressed button is just the opposite. So we have inner shadows, and we have the black at the top and the white at the bottom. And so when you overlay them together, as you can see in the bottom left, it looks like that button is now depressed. And so for this visualization, I actually made the 6 layouts that I used. And I made them all in Figma so that I didn't have to create any actual custom shapes. I just did it all here, which is a little faster. And then I'm going to show a trick I used about transparent shapes that I used to make the buttons. So let's see if I can pull up real quick. Okay, so here is my, can you see Figma now? Or do you still see, yeah, okay, cool. Awesome. So you'll see, where's my mouse? That'd be helpful. Oops. That's super weird. I can't see. Oh, hang on. can't see my mouse. That's very bizarre. Oops. That's not what I want to do either. Oh, there we go. Now I got it back. Okay, cool. Sorry about that. All right, so let's just real quick here. There we go. All right, so I'm just going to make a rectangle here. And we're going to just pretend this is my background. We'll just make it a similar color. So first I make my background, and then we make our buttons. And so as I mentioned, we'll drag in another rectangle. Well, I'll make it a square. Make it a little rounded edge. It's super easy. And let's just make this a different color. Okay. So as I said, the way I've done this is just adding in 2 drop shadows. So the first one I make is going to be my black one, which I do at a space of 4 and 4, which means it's just a little off center. And we'll do a blur of 10. You can start to sort of see that right there. And then I add one more that now we'll just do it -3. We'll make this one white. 8. Oops, not 48. That'll be not right. There we go. Okay, so now you can kind of see this button where it has the 2 shadings on both sides of it. Similar to Jess's trick, if I just press, in my case, Alt or Control and drag, I can copy. It's very similar to how you can do that in Tableau. And now I'm going to make this one ever so slightly smaller, and we're going to change these drop shadows to an inner shadow. So now my inner shadow, and now we're going to make this one an inner. Change this so it makes it a little not quite as -2. And then this one, we're going to change this back down a little bit as well. Okay, so now I have my inner shadows, and we'll see as I drag this on top of here. Let's move that over a little bit. I don't know why it's not the same size. There we go. There you go. And you can kind of see that it has a depressed shape now. Fix that. There. And so there's something like the buttons that I created. So for each of these, I just had to create one inner shape and one outer shape. And I just moved them along the line to get my viz. And then just to show kind of how this transition kind of also occurred, you know, I started in one spot with some different images and backgrounds, the colors were wrong, and you see how things kind of evolved over time at the end. I also use Figma to create these, the labels in here. It's much easier than in PowerPoint being able to rotate things. Okay. So the next thing to talk about is this chord diagram. Now I'm not actually going to go into the details of it because it's pretty complicated, but I do just want to show it because, oops, sorry. This is where the idea had come from, and I think I can, yeah. So here's the actual original where for my company I was trying to provide, we had done this creative assessment that Adobe had put out. And the way it works is each creative type has an ideal collaborator. So in this case, for example, at the top here, the artist, their ideal collaborator is a producer. And you can follow this red line down to the producer down here. And so my original thought was try to like connect all of these different personas or these different creative types to one another and kind of make this connection. And you can click on any of, I can't see my mouse again, so let's see if it'll work. Oops, there it goes. You can click on any of these and it'll show, there it goes. It'll show the person. So I'm an innovator, and that's what I am. I tried to do something like that for my iron vids. It didn't quite work out exactly that way. But what I want to share here is that in this viz, there's actually only the one chart. So on this whole, you can see in my item hierarchy, there's a lot more on this particular mobile page, but only one of them is an actual data-driven chart. So aside from the chords, this is basically just a dual axis chart. One has the Bezier curves for giving the chords, as you can see on the left, and the other axis, the dual axis part is just these XY coordinates for the moons. And so those I actually created in Excel. So it's pretty easy around a circle to figure out kind of the points of a number of objects. So in this case, you can see I had like an X, like right here, like my XY is 0 and 10, and 0 and 10, and 10 and 0. And then so I just had to figure out what the points would be for the other 4. And I just put that all in Excel and pulled it in. And so it was pretty easy to make this circular chart. The tip that I want to share is using these transparent navigation buttons. So as I mentioned, I used my background images as just one image. And then in order to create buttons, or what appears to be a button, again, a lot of this is just an illusion to some degree, I put what you'll see here, these buttons. These are these 4 buttons here. They're actually all blank or transparent shapes. So I have a custom shape that is literally nothing. So you go into PowerPoint, make any shape you want, make a square, have a fill of none and no lines, and then save it as a picture and put it in your custom shape Tableau repository like Jessica had shared in hers, or you can make custom shapes. So the shape actually has no visual value, although it does exist. And I use that here so that someone can click on the actual Tableau navigation button, and it appears like they're clicking on this moon, but really the moon is the background image. So they're not clicking on a shape of a moon at all. So I used these transparent shapes throughout my visualization. I use them a lot actually in customer or client work as well. I find because I can make different like Kpi tiles if I have images, and I can just hover these buttons over things. It actually cuts down on my need to create like multiple custom buttons and put them in my custom shape file, which sometimes I don't want to clutter up or don't want to have to hand off to a client. I think I'm going to, with time, probably skip this, but the other thing in this vid is when you click on any of these, I have something appear. So I have an action filter, or an action, dashboard action that will reveal an answer when you clicked on it, which is kind of fun. Okay, so the next thing I want to show is how to create show hide labels and annotations. So I'm not going to go into the actual visualization of making this crazy chart thing because that's also too complicated for this presentation, but a really nice trick to be able to use that you could use today is this show hide label. This was the inspiration for the visualization that I did use. Well, I had seen this and thought it was a really great visualization done by Yuta Saki. So it took me a while to both figure out how to do it and then figure out how to replicate it for what I needed to do, which was not a complete match to match. So I had to do a lot more data development on it, but some of the iterations. Okay, so let's get into the show hide label. If you haven't done this before, one of the things that I always find a little frustrating is that when you label something, you don't have the opportunity to have someone turn it off. So in my visualization case, if I just go back a sec, you can see it's pretty cluttered when you have the labels on, but I still wanted to have the opportunity for someone to actually see those values. And the values are how long I slept each night. So I didn't want them to have to hover, but you could see like a high and low and actually get the value. So in order to do this, I used a parameter action, or a parameter for this. And essentially the parameter is hide or show. And just a quick useful trick if you don't use it is Tableau allows you to put a value in for your parameter and then a display ad. And this is really useful for when you're writing calculations, you don't have to write out a very long display, very long value. You could even write like a 0 and a 1 if you wanted to, if you remember those kinds of quick things, and then a display as. So really great little trick there. So you make your parameter that's just that's 2 values, a show and a hide. And then the parameter calculation here is if it's a label, so if my parameter is show, then show my value, and otherwise nothing. So I use this on my text, and then only when the parameter is set at show does any value or any text show up on my labels. And otherwise nothing shows up. So I use that a lot as well. Okay. The next kind of trick or technique I'm going to share is about building effective animated lines. So I don't use the animations too much in general, though I think they're really gorgeous if you can get them to work just right. But one of the challenges is that you have to have, animations are really just the mark transitions, but you have to have all the marks that you're using on the page in order to have them transition. So just filtering just kind of brings up your other, a new line or a new, new mark. I had used Littlevick's blog on the curvy lines if you wanted to look into that. But again, so what I did in my visualization is I have 2 lines. I have temperature, and then I have melatonin values. And what I wanted to do is to have 1 line morph into 2. Well, in order to do that, you have to have all the marks for both lines on your visualization at the same time. But I didn't really want both of them to show. That was the whole point, is I wanted to go from one to another. So the way you do this is, or the way I did this at least, and I'll actually, I'll show you how to do this. So you create a parameter, again, that has 2 values. So in my case, I have the value of temperature and melatonin. For temperature, I only want the line for temperature to show. And when I have melatonin, I want to add melatonin to the view. So I want 2 lines. So what you'll do is you add your main value to your X. So in my case, I had time. Let me just, here we go. That might help a little better. So I have time along my X-axis, and these are hours of the day. And then along my Y, I have temperature in degrees. And so this is what it looks like with just a regular line chart, not a curved one. So next, you create a calculated field for your dual axis, and this field will show your value, your y-axis, your temperature in this case, or your morphing value, which in my case is melatonin. So here I say, if the parameter is add melatonin, if the parameter, my parameter happens to be called add melatonin. So if it's temperature, then I just want to show temperature, and if it's not, I'm going to show melatonin. And so this is what's used on the second dual axis. So I actually have 2 axes here. One is just degrees, and one is degrees or melatonin, which means when they're both set at temperature, they're actually just overlaid lines. They're exactly the same. And when they're not, the melatonin is going to come out. And so here you'll, oops, let me get that back. Here you'll see it in working. So I have at the top, you can see the regular old value, degrees, and then my parameter value, which when they're both at temperature, they match. When they're not, melatonin pops out. And you just have to make sure that the parameter value, the marks are behind the other ones. So they just overlay. So that was just the trick I used here to have all marks, marks out on the view, 48 of them, and a parameter to have it show. So I thought that was pretty cool. And so again, so this is how I actually originally started, and my husband said he thought I was graphing the recession. So I was like, what do you think I'm graphing? He's a financial advisor, so that wasn't surprising. That's what he thought. So there you can see it in action, kind of clicking on it. So it looks kind of slick as it like kind of comes out of the other one. Okay. The next trick that I use frequently also at work is using the prefix and suffixes in your format numbers. So in my case, I had temperature. And so in order to do this, you can put in a symbol or a Unicode character into this suffix space. So you just right click on your axis, click format, and you can add in these prefix or suffixes. I also find this really helpful just as a trick. Sometimes I have clients who have their data, it's a percent, but it comes over literally as like 55.5 and not as 0.555. And so it's already coming over. And instead of creating a calculation where you're saying, well, I want to make it a percent, we're going to take their value and divide it by 100 and then put the format as a percent, I just put it in and put a suffix of a percent sign. And so that solves that problem with, you know, trying to adjust the data that's provided to you. So if you haven't used that one before, that can be super helpful. Okay. The next section of my viz was where I used reference lines and LODs. So I should probably show there's what I'm talking about. So I use this a lot at work too, where I have a bar chart and I want to show another value as a reference line. Problem is all those values are, they're not separate. So you don't have, like in this case, I had sufficient sleepers and insufficient sleepers, and those weren't two measures. They were within the same dimension. So like a filter, well, I couldn't filter both of them, but I wanted to show both of them in these different ways. So I use LODs a lot for this. Let's go back. So what I end up doing is doing a fixed statement where I fix it at in this case, the level of detail of the actual dimension. So this was the sleep type, the health detail, which was like arthritis, depression, asthma in my case. So I fix it at that level, and then I say, if the sleep type was sufficient sleep, then bring the percent, otherwise don't bring anything. And so essentially this is not filtering anything, it's just going to it's going to be null for it. So I will just get sufficient sleep, and then I do another one for the insufficient sleep, and I can bring both of these values now into the same view without any filters. And so you have your, in this case, sufficient sleep is my bar, and then I put the insufficient sleep on my details marks card, and then bring it in as a reference line. So I do this a lot if you have something like all states and you want to have like a statewide average as compared to the state, and you can do kind of a fixed where you can bring those in without filtering. Okay, last couple. So the next one is about how much I love containers. And even though I float some stuff as well, I do really like containers. Once you get like familiar with them, they are really fantastic. So if you don't know what containers are, they're horizontal and vertical, and they allow you just to group objects together. They can be moved around really easily, so you can grab like a bunch of objects that are in a container and move them around your dashboard, which I find very convenient. They can also be, you can really custom size them. You can distribute the objects within them evenly, which makes a really pixel perfect design. You can also add background colors, margin padding, borders, all with perfect spacing. And so I find this way easier than floating things. Sometimes I'll just add extra margins to get things to line up, extra padding, so they can be really useful. So here's just an example of how I've used the containers in this particular IronViz visualization. Oops, sorry, oh, too far. You can see here the separations where I have all these things organized together. So on the left, these are all this is just horizontal. You can see on the far right, I have horizontal, and then I have vertical ones, or this is, I guess, horizontal, and these are vertical rather. So sometimes I put containers within containers, but it really helps to organize a visualization. And once you get the hang of it, it's way easier than even just doing straight old tiled, and it helps keep your design like really clean and organized. And the last thing I'm going to share is about navigation buttons, but text navigation buttons. So I showed earlier about using blank shapes. I also use custom shapes as navigation buttons. But I think don't be shy to use simple text buttons. They're actually really efficient, and I'm starting to really like them. So this is for your navigation button. You can just make it a text. You write your text in, but I add some pizzazz using Unicode characters. So at least for me on my Mac, I have a little let's see if I can get to my desktop. Up here, I have this little American flag, and I can show emojis and symbols. It probably won't show because I have like, oh, there it is. And so I use this all the time, where then I grab any of these values and put them into my text in my visualization. So we have arrows, and then I can just grab like the arrow, and that's what I did in this is where I have view sources. I can click on that, a little arrow, takes me there, and go back home. So again, and I use these a lot now more at work, where there's a back to home button, can just be really simple with your arrow. And it kind of is really just clean and out of the way. So don't forget that that's there, because I think it's super useful. And that is pretty much the end of this. What I just want to say is this whole experience for me was really enlightening. So perfection is the eye of the beholder. I mean, for me, this was, I was really proud of this Iron Viz. I thought, aside from it just being, you know, beautiful to me, I tried a lot of new things, learned some new tricks. I think for every visualization I do, my end goal is really just to learn something new. I try to use some old, you know, back pocket tricks, but I want to learn something. And so there was a ton that I learned in just trying to build this. And I think, as Jessica said, when you kind of are learning, you have a goal, an idea in mind, and you just keep going until you figure it out. And that's pretty much how I tend to learn, is just going to try to make it happen. And you learn so much of what Tableau can do along the way, either on your own or by Googling, asking other people, finding blogs, what have you. And so thanks so much for having me and letting me share my experience with my Iron Viz.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. That was super interesting. I absolutely loved it. I'm sure a lot of other people did as well. There was a lot of fantastic tips in there. It was like a tips and tricks session, just walking through your viz. And really unique, you know, really different than a lot of the other vizes that we've seen out in Iron Viz or just in general. So really, really cool design. And I never get the amount of sleep I would like. So it's really interesting topic as well. You got 8 hours of sleep 41% of the time. I want to be in your house.
Okay. See, that's not enough to me.
Oh my goodness.
I should probably show it.
That's a dream for me right there.
Oh man, I need 8 hours. So the times that I get less than that, it's not good. I think like this day I was probably really working. The one that I had 5 hours, that was a day that I stayed up late working on my Iron Viz, I think. But yeah, and I did, so you can still see my screen, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so, and I did, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, how did you actually track how much sleep you got? What did you use, like a iPhone app, or did you just, you know, look at a clock and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I have a monitor that allegedly tracks my sleep, but I don't trust it really well. I also have another thing that called Bella Beat that I've had for years that you can wear on your neck, and I think it does a much better job because it'll actually tell me if when I'm restless, or if I woke up in the middle of the night, it'll say like I walked around, like it's a little more detailed. So I took the two together, and I also tried to just pay attention when I thought I went to sleep versus when I woke up. And so there was a lot more manual like adjustments, because when this thing said I slept for like 9 hours, I'm like, that didn't happen. I was like, that's not even possible. So then I would be like, okay, I definitely probably slept closer to, 7 hours or whatever. So I did, I took a couple different data points to try to get a good reflection of what happened. But yeah, so that was kind of fun to see how, I guess, erratic, or I certainly don't get the same amount of sleep every day, and how some of the moon cycles seem to play into it. And you can see from the annotations here, the only day I got a lot of sleep was on my birthday. My husband let me sleep in.
As you should.
Right.
So we've got a couple questions in the pigeonhole. I was thinking we could let you still share so that you can have your thing in front of you. But the first question is the Sleep Viz available on Tableau Public?
Yes, it is. You can find it on my,
Okay.
on my Tableau profile.
And your Tableau profile, I will put in the chat. I've got it up. And let's see, I'll put it in the comment. Is it under the Betzendahl? Lindsay Betzendahl?
That's correct. Oh. Yeah, it's just part of the.
I know I've seen it somewhere up there. Okay. So I've answered that question in the chat area. Next question is, does Lindsay have a blog?
I do. So it's Betzendahl. And I can put that in here too. So I've been a little behind on posting because of a number of different issues going on, but yeah, I like to share some, tips and tricks, how-tos, things like that. So I have a number of things lined up, hopefully, that I'll finally get back to.
I see Betzendahl. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I will put that in the answers. And you know what? Let's see here. Those are the two questions we have in the pigeonhole right now.
Cool.
Let's see here. I'll go back to the chat. Where am I?
Yeah, I don't see any questions, but that's
okay,
cool.
You even put it in there.
Yeah, just in case. Yeah, so I have a couple. Some of the things that I talked about even today, like this is show hide containers. I have the using blank transparent shapes. Some of the things that I use in my Iron Viz, I've already written some blogs on because I've used them in the past. So you definitely find some things there.
Nice.
Hey, Lindsay, this is Jess. I just want to say, wow, like your work is incredible. I love it. I did have a question. That Figma, is that like a free service that you use? You showed it earlier. Okay. Yeah, it's really cool. So basically, because I don't do this enough, and I think it looks so great when people do. So you essentially create what you want your background to look like, and then you put that as the transparent background, right? And then you kind of, okay. Yeah, I just wanted to understand the process because I think that's awesome.
So I put it in as the background, and then in this case, and then usually, I guess, depending on if it's a full background, you do have to float everything else on top. So what I tend to do then is make, pretend like another tiled thing, and then I just pretend that I'm not floating. Like I start tiling and using containers just on top of that background. So there's only one thing that's floating, which happens to be like everything, but it's all contained. So in Figma, you can see you can have a number of different projects where I just kind of like randomly, make stuff in here, and you can, create objects, and even within it, see, this one's like a work one. So they do, you can have more pages. So I have like, here's a background I'm doing for someone, right? So you can just, I did a viz where I did a background. So you can save all this. It's just there, it just saves. So it's pretty cool because if I create this whole background and I use this in a viz.
Yeah.
When you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy. I like that, like, let me do that. Things just snap together really easily. You have a lot of flexibility. I find it a lot easier now than PowerPoint to use, and I don't have to worry about like losing it because it's all kind of right here.
Yeah, no, that looks really cool. I'm gonna check that out. I haven't seen that before.
Yeah, totally free. I guess nothing interesting, but yeah, it's fun.
Cool. And then you mentioned something with Drizzle and as another place you find inspiration.
So Dribble. So it's Dribble.
Oh, Dribble. Okay.
Yeah, and so it's kind of like a Pinterest-ish, except for I don't use Pinterest, but these are where like designers, like web designers, app designers and stuff, illustrators post their information. So I don't, I have a handful of things that I kind of collect, layout ideas and color inspiration. And you'll see, if you look at some of these, you'll see, you've probably seen other Tableau Public folks get inspiration from here. So like this was like I copied this one entirely because I wanted to try to see if I could create it myself. And same with like this one, I've used something similar. I've done this, like I use these as good inspiration, and then create them in Figma.
Okay, cool.
So
Very cool.
yeah, that's where, and again, this is kind of just like a, free account as well you can have. So that's where I got some of the ideas for that app type background. Is I happened to just find one that I liked the colors, and I was like, I think I could do something with this. Yeah, there it is. That's the one that kind of sparked my interest to get the whole sleep idea going.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is really useful to see.
Yeah. It gives me like just ideas. I'm not I'm good at like copying things or kind of getting an idea, like like I think I used one of these where I'm like, I like where that title's positioned. I like that it has a period after that. That's totally unnecessary, but I like it. And like I'll just use that, like that little part of something in a viz, or it'll just spark ideas because you can just take elements from so many different things out in the world. And yeah, this is a good place for some of that very creative design.
Nice.
We do have another question in the pigeonhole from Sadal. It says, awesome viz. Looking back, would you make yours more of a long form viz? Might you revert back if you enter next year?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have a real challenge with long form vizzes. It's hard for me to conceptualize like so much information at once and where I'm going to put it all. And so, I don't know. I really like the mobile thing. I really like tiny things in general. So I think I may just continue to try to perfect the mobile design aspect. And how do you fit? I mean, it's a challenge, right? Like, how do you fit so much information in a small space and still have it be not too much information or not enough information in this case? And I think with long form, you have so much real estate that it allows people to put in a ton of information or a lot of waste space, which I think is gorgeous. And right, there's a reason those things do well. But I don't know. It's just still not quite my thing. I don't know why. I know everyone loves them, but I don't know. I might keep trying to do something different.